Hi, welcome back to the Mindful Space. We have Sheri today. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Today we're going to be talking about RRT, which is Rapid Resolution Therapy, correct?
Yes.
Before, I want you to introduce yourself for our audience.
Sure. So I'm Sheri Johnson, and I am fairly new, about a year and a half living in South Florida, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker here. So I work in private practice, practicing psychotherapy as well as rapid resolution therapy. And in addition to that, I'm the founder and clinical director of a group private practice that offers virtual psychotherapy up in Vancouver, Canada.
Canada.
Yeah.
Nice. How come you're not living in Canada? You like South Florida better?
I do.
Sunny times?
It's so warm. It's so tropical. I just, I needed a little break from all that rain.
Oh my God, yes.
So,
how did you get into this field of specializing in RRT?
so I became a social worker over a decade ago and was working in hospitals, in trauma units, emergencies, ICUs, and I just really loved helping people and supporting them through these crises and traumas that they were experiencing. And I started doing some research in the field and just became very passionate about trauma. So then I found out about rapid resolution therapy and how it can clear up the effects of trauma and PTSD within 1 to 2 sessions. And I thought that sounded amazing. Yeah.
It sounds not credible, like impossible.
I know it sounds too good to be true. And, but it's becoming a lot more mainstream now. And the demand is so high. I'm booked like 3 months out just for people that are looking for RRT. So yeah, it's really exciting. I'm so happy to be providing this modality. I've taken about 300 hours of training so far. Yeah.
What is specifically RRT? What does it entail?
So it is a psychotherapy modality, and it is I'd say it's quite different than traditional psychotherapy. So it's not talk therapy.
I was going to say, I'm like, wait, psychotherapy in 2 to 3 sessions makes no sense.
Exactly.
Because in psychotherapy, you usually just talk and,
yes,
your past and your past. And okay.
Exactly. RRT is a really unique approach. So people may come into therapy to be treated for the effects of a rape, for example, but they don't have to go into detail about the trauma. They don't have to re-experience it or feel the emotions. A lot of times I'm finding with my clients, they're laughing, we're using humor. There's a lot of uplift throughout the whole session. And some people even say that it feels underwhelming because they expected that they would be feeling, pain. They come with their big box of Kleenex, but then they're like, wait a second, I didn't actually need this at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's really quite different than regular talk therapy because we're not doing a trauma inventory. We're not doing a deep dive into the past. We're keeping them present and clearing up what's going on for them presently.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, how does it work? Is there a specific format, or how would you go with a client that comes to see you?
So traditionally, depending on the case, we would do an initial intensive. So 2 to 3 hour session, which is pretty long, a lot longer than regular therapy, but it is usually done just in that one session. Depending on the case, I might follow up with them 1 or 2 times or maybe up to 5 times, just depending on their issue or if they have additional issues. But typically we select one issue and we try to clear that up in the session.
2 to 3 hours, one session, you're done. Yeah. Thank you for coming.
Exactly.
That's insane.
I know, it really is. And honestly, when I took the first training, it was a 40-hour training. I flew down to LA to do that. And then I came back and I thought, like, this is a lot of pressure. Like, how am I supposed to tell people I can cure them in 2 hours? Yeah. Like, that sounds crazy. So I did it on my best friend. She had driving anxiety because if she had been in a lot of accidents. And so every time she'd get in the car, she'd have sweaty hands. She'd be arguing with whoever was in the car. It was just a big stressful experience for her.
Mhm.
And so we did we did 45 minutes in a session.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a 2 or 3 hour session. I
Just trying it
just,
out.
yes, exactly. It was my first time. And she hasn't had the anxiety since. We actually went driving right after the session. And
Really?
I was the one like honking the horn and like slamming the brakes on. And she was like, Sheri. And I'm like, wait a
Relax.
second, the tables have turned here. Like, what's going on?
Exactly.
So that was my first
Mhm.
experience with it. And ever since then, like just using the protocols and the techniques in the correct way, it just results in very consistent positive results for people. I would say that in my experience using other modalities, RRT has a much higher percentage of success rates compared
Interesting.
to using the other modalities, at least in my own experience. So,
What kind of people can benefit from this type of therapy or this modality?
RRT was developed by Dr. John Connolly, who is a social worker and psychotherapist.
Mhm.
And he initially was doing regular psychotherapy for people with sexual trauma and past experiences of childhood molestation. And back when he was first training, he was doing a lot of this therapy where there was I've heard these stories where there were even like vomit buckets beside them, and they would just have to relive and like retell their story, and it was just so painful. And
Until they
he,
didn't throw up anymore, or
I guess,
what was the ultimate goal?
I don't know. I think that was back in
Okay.
like I think the 70s,
Oh,
so a
okay.
really long
Makes
time ago.
sense. Just put a
Yeah,
bucket next to you.
exactly.
Okay.
But he just thought, there's got to be some better way to do this. So using different techniques and different processes from different modalities, um, he created the RRT process over the years. And so it was originally developed for people with sexual trauma and PTSD, but it's wonderful for that, but it's actually now used for almost every other type of problem or
Mhm.
issue that someone might present with. A lot of my clients, even though I specialize in trauma and PTSD, a lot of my clients are seeking out RRT for help with their businesses. So if somebody's an
Interesting.
entrepreneur, they're saying, um, I'm stuck, or I can't move forward. I can't seem to get past this point. And so
Mhm.
we'll talk about it and get to the root of it and use RRT to clear that up. And I've had some amazing experiences lately working with a lot of different entrepreneurs. And it's just been a lot of fun to see like how
Uh-huh.
it's affected their businesses and their growth and everything like that.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Um, if they don't, you say one is enough, but if they, as needed, you can get two or three up to five sessions,
Yeah.
depending on the trauma or what is it for?
Some people will come to me with not so much clarity on exactly what they want to address. They're just struggling in general. And
Mhm.
so I might start off with a shorter session to just
Mhm.
kind of tease it out. And then if we can get to a point where we identified something
Mhm.
specific, then we'll do an intensive.
You mentioned basically anybody can really benefit from this therapy, right? What about for the trauma? How does it benefit specifically for clients that have been through trauma?
So the amazing part about RRT is that they don't have to relive the trauma. With RRT, they don't even have to
Yeah.
tell me about it. If somebody had a sexual trauma, I don't need to know the details in order to help them clear it up. There's different techniques involved with RRT that we call ghost busting. It's
Mhm.
basically something from the
It's
past that's
catchy.
been haunting you that has continued to show up. And so we use these different ghost busting techniques to rewire the brain and the way it's been processing information about the trauma or about things in present day life as a result of previous trauma that's been stuck. So we get that trauma unstuck so their mind understands that it's over, it doesn't exist, and they're here now and they're free. And So we really worked to shift and change those neural pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really cool to see that happening right in front of my eyes in session.
Especially if you're the one directing the orchestra.
Totally.
Like, wait, I did that.
Yeah, it's really like sometimes surreal. It never gets old. It just really energizes me as a therapist. I think a lot of trauma therapists get burnt out from the work that they're doing because, trauma therapy can be really heavy. And so with RRT, just the way the mindset is for the therapist, and then just the results that we're getting so quickly, it just fires me up and energizes me so much when I'm doing it, and I never feel burnt out. So that's an amazing part of
Yeah,
it.
if you don't have to hear the story either, for you as a therapist, that's, relieving as well as
For
the
sure.
client.
Exactly.
Takes a lot.
I did some research in the past on vicarious trauma, and there's a lot of vicarious trauma that happens with therapists that are dealing with sexual trauma. So vicarious trauma is basically when you are hearing stories that are traumatic for someone else, and then over time you can become traumatized or start
Yourself.
experiencing your own trauma from that. So with RRT, that just does not happen.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why I've
There's
made
no symptoms.
exactly, yes, and I've made RRT one of my primary modalities for therapy.
That's
So,
great. Can you tell us a little success story of one of your clients, maybe?
yeah, sure. So, there's so many,
Which is
but
good.
yeah. I think one really exciting one was I had a client who presented with fear of flying. This is actually a really common phobia. People can develop it for various different reasons, maybe a previous experience on a flight when they were younger. And so this individual had extreme anxiety. Whenever they would get on a flight, they'd have to take all these medications to calm themselves down, prevent a panic attack. And they wanted to be able to travel with their family and enjoy life.
Yeah.
So we did the RRT. With that particular client, we did an initial session, just a shorter session to kind of get to know the problem. And then we had an intensive. And then he took his flight and he was totally calm.
What did he come back and say to you? Do people feel very excited about the progress? Like, can they even believe it?
Sometimes I don't even hear back from them because, they're just like,
course.
they're better, so they don't need any more help. But I do usually reach out if I haven't heard back, I reach out. How's it going?
Yeah, just to make
did you
sure I
notice
didn't have
any
another
difference?
panic attack.
Exactly. And I did reach out to him, and he wrote back saying that he had just had an amazing flight. It was just like completely different, and he just was very grateful. And now he can go into retirement and enjoy traveling with his family. And
Yeah, that's so rewarding.
Totally.
As a therapist, at least.
Yes.
At least I can relate.
The other thing, I just want to say like a few more because because I do work with trauma so much. I worked with a veteran once, and he had multiple childhood traumas, but also some significant traumas in when working.
Yeah, like in the battlefield.
Yes, exactly. So when we did just, I think for him it was a 2.5 hour session, and we did just the regular RRT processes. And this is one of my first veterans that I saw using RRT. There was some significant flashbacks and things. There was a ton of guilt associated with what he had done and experienced during the war, and as well as some significant grief. So there was a lot going on for him.
Yeah.
But we just did the RRT process, and we addressed each thing using the protocols, and he felt great. And he booked another session afterwards, just a 1 hour session. And then when we met, he said, I only booked this because I just want to understand what you did to me.
Really?
Yeah.
What's your secret?
Exactly. And so, so I just explained what I did, and he was just so shocked because he had lived with this heaviness for so many years. And in one session, it was just all clear.
Yeah, I mean, those results are just fascinating. It makes me want to go and do an RRT therapy. Like, oh, One session, that sounds ideal.
I know, right? I think
Yes.
that, right? I think it's going to pick up so much more because people are really people aren't looking to do therapy for years on end. And I think
Mhm.
that's really what initially drew me to RRT is because I've just seen people that I know go through years of therapy or just really painful therapy and
Mhm.
not get the results that they wanted, or just not complete therapy because it's too painful.
Yes.
So with RRT, you just don't need to do that. And that's what drew me to it.
I
Um,
think people, a lot of the regular people are like the people that are looking for therapy,
Mhm.
if they're not in this field, they don't even know about the different modalities, right? So they're just looking for a therapist. And then whatever they get, they see if there's a connection or if they like what's happening. They don't know if there's solution focus, see like anything, RRT. So they really have to look into and do their own research and see, if you have the trauma, then this is recommended, or family issues and this. But it's the more we talk about it, about the different types of therapy, then the more people get to know that they do have options.
Totally.
So that's important.
And a lot of people, like I'm working with my marketing guru right
Mhm.
now, and she's saying that people are actually searching for therapy type now. So a lot of more people are educated now on the types of therapies that are available, whereas not so much before. I think people are, mental health in general, the stigma is being lifted, more people are talking about it,
Mhm.
and they're able to find and research different types of therapies. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's the future. Future we're going to talk about, everybody's going to be informed.
Exactly.
Or at least that's what we hope for.
Exactly.
When talking about different modalities, I know this one is very similar, it can be very similar to EMDR. Do you mind explaining the differences?
Yeah. I would say the results can be more similar than the actual style. So with EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So it is basically where you sit there and you have an actual device in front of you. It's like a light bar like this,
Mhm.
and you follow the light as it moves, and you go over the trauma. So multiple times you have to go over the trauma. And oftentimes EMDR can take anywheres from like, you know, 8 to 10 sessions, I would say. It can vary from person to person. Sometimes
Mhm.
EMDR can be successful in a couple of sessions, but with RRT, it can be effective just in one session. So I think that's like the main difference.
Okay.
Um, and
Mhm.
as well, we're not having the person go over the trauma multiple times.
Okay. So the technique
Whereas
itself is different.
the technique's very different. With RRT, it feels very much like a conversation, and we're using techniques in the conversation, in the languaging, that causes a shift even before we do the intervention piece. So sometimes I'm working with somebody and we're halfway through, we've just basically been talking about the issue and getting really clear on that. And because of the languaging I'm using, they'll stop and say like, whoa, I kind of feel weird. Like what's going on? Because we're framing the issue so differently than they've ever framed it before,
Mhm.
and using the different RRT techniques in conversing about it, they feel different often before we even do those interventions.
Yeah.
So it is very much like a conversation. And then I would also say it's quite experiential too. So that's another difference between talk therapy and RRT is that we're doing things like meditative experiences with the eyes closed using imagery, symbolism,
Okay.
and things like that, which help to really get the message of freedom to their unconscious mind. So you can tell somebody that, you know what, that's over, you survived, and you're safe now. And they understand that here up in their
It's
conscious
yeah.
mind. But the reason why they've still been experiencing fear is because their unconscious mind didn't really get that message. It's not caught up. So with our RT, we're working with the conscious mind, but we're also working with the unconscious mind so that the whole mind can get that message that they're safe, that the trauma is over.
It's so interesting to me, especially with the traumatic cases, because people do suffer. So if we're able to do a modality that can help them in 1 or 2 sessions, I think that's wonderful. And I'm all for
Yeah,
it.
totally.
How can family and friends help someone that have been through a traumatic event? How can they show their support?
So I think somebody who's gone through trauma might be exhibiting different behaviors or emotions or reactions to things, and it's not always clear that those are the results of a trauma. So I think for family members and loved ones who are experiencing this in someone in their lives, it's really useful for them to educate themselves on the symptoms of trauma and try to understand why they may be experiencing what they're going through. So that education piece is really useful. And there's so much information online right now about mental health and trauma. So that can be really helpful to just educate
Yeah, educate
yourselves.
yourself.
Yes, exactly.
So you're able to give the information to that loved one.
Exactly. And as well, I think, as I said before, mental health stigma is lifting in society, and it's much more common to talk about mental health, to talk about anxiety, depression, mood issues. These are all very common, and yet some people are still experiencing a lot of shame as a result of their symptoms and their mental health issues. So I would say, as a loved one, to just try to normalize that. There's millions of people in the US, Canada, that are experiencing PTSD and trauma and different mental health issues. And it's much more common than we think. So just normalizing that for people and encouraging them to get help can be really useful.
Yeah, it can be liberating.
Exactly.
Make them feel very comfortable, instead of having this stigma around the subject.
Totally.
That's why we have these conversations. Now, for the people that might be considering looking into the RRT or have some traumatic event just happen or just considering therapy in general, what would be your last message for them? What would be your advice?
Well, I would say a lot of people avoid getting help when they really need it because they feel that they have to face that trauma again or bring up stuff that they really don't want to talk about or think about. But I think in therapy, it's designed to create a safe space. If you have the right therapist and you feel safe with them, then that can be a really healing experience, just having that therapeutic relationship. But if somebody's been avoiding therapy for a long time because of an issue and they don't want to talk about it, they're afraid, which is really common, you could try RRT. I think that is a great alternative. And I get a lot of clients who have tried multiple different modalities. And so they're coming to me because they've tried everything else and nothing else has worked, or it's been really painful or just very long and drawn out. They've been in therapy for 6 years or something like that. And so RRT is great for people who've been in that situation, who are just looking for a different kind of experience. And it's not like a huge investment of time. So It's definitely worth trying out.
Yeah. So give me a call.
Exactly.
Find my website.
Totally.
Well, I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming again. I love this conversation. I am definitely going to do my own research as well. It seems like the future with one therapy session. And I just loved it. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was awesome to chat with you today.
Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next week. We have a new episode every Friday at 6. If you like what we talked about, please leave us a comment and don't forget to subscribe. Bye.